Today is the day. Today is the 22nd of February. That's when I'm recording this. I'll be uploading this video next week for me. Today is the day that Avatar: The Last Airbender live action Netflix remake has been released. I'm going to be going through a review of the series. I've only watched the first episode today. I was originally going to be looking at the series episode by episode. However, I think I'm going to do this first episode as its own video, and then I'm going to be looking at the series as a whole once I've finished watching the full thing, which shouldn't take me very long. Let's get into the video. I've got notes on my phone about what I wanted to talk about. Let's get into it. So I'm going to talk about the stuff that I liked, the stuff that I didn't like, and the stuff that I found like an interesting choice, and I'm waiting to see how they develop it before I make a final decision whether I think it was good or not. Let's start off with the good things, the things that I really enjoyed from this first episode. First things first, the production design. And production design as a whole was really good, but the couple of things that I want to highlight, the costumes are absolutely brilliant. The costume for Aang is near perfect, and all of the Water Tribe costumes were calling back to the original show while also looking realistic in the terms of this looks like what people who live in cold climates should be wearing. I'm not an expert in Inuit cultures, so I can't say how good of a job they represent that, but in terms of costume designs, in terms of adapting the original show, they've done an amazing job with that. I really liked Wolf Cove, Sokka and Katara's village. I really liked how in the original show it was just the walled little encampment, but that was designed probably before they fully fleshed out the backstory of Katara. We have that fleshed out now, so having them have ruins around was really cool from like the previous attacks on the Water Tribe from Katara and Sokka's childhood. Sticking with the locations, I really liked the touch of in Zuko's bedchambers, how it almost looked like there's dragon scales on the walls. That was a really nice touch. I just really liked that aspect to his room. And lastly, on production design rather, Sokka's club, man. Sokka's club looks dope, honestly, with the blue ball, and I really hope that he takes that into the library with him in season 2, instead of needing to abandon it and get a new club, because I love that club. It looks so good. Next thing that I want to talk about is the acting. The acting in this show is really good, especially from the younger cast members. Gordon Khmer does a really good job at playing Aang. He does, his acting is very good, and to us, all the younger cast actors do a really good job at acting like children. Like, they're not trying to be mature, they're not trying to be like they're not trying to act like adults. They're acting, and the way they are responding, the way they are talking is the way that children their age respond and talk. How there's those slight awkwardnesses when kids those age haven't learned how to properly deal with certain social situations, so there's those awkward pauses and every so often, and I really like that touch, how it just makes it feel a little bit realer. Wendio, I think that's how you pronounce it, I could be very wrong, but the actress playing Katara also does a really good job. She is managing to portray Katara's hopefulness while also having that weight on the shoulders of being the last waterbender in her tribe. She does a really good job at carrying that. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee does a really good job at playing Iroh, of having that really conflicted era about him, and does a really good job at portraying that, as I said, conflicted, I'm looking after my nephew, but also I don't really 100% agree with what he's doing. And also, he loves his tea, and I appreciate the fact that they're keeping with that in his character, that he's a good-hearted man to his core, and he's just a dude who loves tea. He's just a dude who loves tea. The next thing that I want to talk about is the effects. Obviously, the special effects is what's really going to be making or breaking this show. If the bending and if the magic system doesn't look believable, doesn't look good, it's all just going to fall apart. And at least in the first episode, the bending looks really good. We didn't see much earth bending in the first episode, and I am nervous because the earth bending that we did see all happened at night, and the earthbending that we saw in the trailer that happened during the day in like Boomy's fight and stuff doesn't look the best, so I'm holding out hope that the bending continues. And the last thing that I really liked is the fight choreography. Obviously they're going to be getting proper good stunt performers to be portraying it, but as a martial artist, I always appreciate a little bit of hand-to-hand combat. There might have been a little bit too much hand-to-hand combat in the siege of the Southern Air Temple, in my opinion, for like the airbenders might have been using a little bit too much hand-to-hand combat. Alright, now we're going to get on to my list of negatives, the stuff that I didn't particularly like. And the first thing that I'm going to say isn't on my notes, but I've just remembered it, and it was a big one for me. Every time I saw it, I was like, I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of that Aang can fly. It kind of negates the point of his staff and his glider. Like, why would he bother having that glider if he can fly anyway? For those who don't know the lore behind bending, flying is something that you're not really supposed to be able to do unless you detach yourself fully from all earthly possessions. And the time that we do see Aang flying is when he still has attachments to Gyatso and his fellow airbenders. So I feel like that is, and yes, you could argue that he's just airbending the air around him. However, it's pretty much flying. Just that too close to flying for me to be comfortable with it, if that makes sense. Next one that I'm not particularly keen on is the fact that there was a load of older kids and old men at Wolf Cove in the Southern Water Tribe. That kind of negates the whole idea of Sokka being the leader. Yes, he's the chief's son, but there are older men who probably were warriors at some point who might be able to take charge until Sokka gets older. Do you know what I mean? And on top of that, in the animated show, it was really that whole Sokka's journey to be a leader starts with him being a leader, and that whole air quotations around it is depicted with him being a leader of children. And yes, there are children in his army, but there's also some older teenagers as well. So it kind of just takes away from Sokka's story arc a little bit. Like, he clearly has a fair amount of experience already being a leader, where at this point in the storyline, in the original show, he's not really a leader. He's not good at being a leader. But here he's being shown as being respected by the tribe, if that makes sense. I mentioned the acting was really good, and Dallas Liu as Zuko is doing a good job as acting, but I just haven't been convinced yet that he's Zuko, if that makes sense. I'm not getting that angst, that proper angst from him yet, and I'm hoping that as the series progresses, he develops more in that angst. Speaking of characters, I'm not a big fan of the character introductions. There's a really good YouTuber called Overanalyzing Avatar who goes through every episode of the series, and one of the things that he mentions whenever there's a new character involved is how Avatar, the original show, was so good at depicting who these characters are in the first 3 or 4 lines that they say when we meet them. And it's 100% true. You get, in the original show, you get an idea of who all the characters are, what they're like, what their personalities are in the first 10 seconds of meeting them. And in the first episode of this show, I didn't really get that. I'm not a big fan of the lack of Aang Katara, or of Aang having Katara to rely on. Like, when Gyatso is found, when his body is found in the original show, it's Katara who calms him down, who brings him out of the Avatar state, which foreshadows their relationship developing in the future. We didn't have that here. And there was a couple of the moments, like the penguin sledding. Katara is like, I haven't done this since I was a kid, and I was like, you still are a kid. And having that connection between each other, all their scenes together have just been like exposition, essentially. So I'm really hoping they kind of kick things into gear a bit with Aang and Katara's relationship. Unless they're deciding to go through with Zutara, in which case, forget I said anything. Speaking of Katara, I'm not a big fan that she was able to save the day the way that she did in this version of the escape from Zuko's ship. After one set of words of wisdom from Aang, she was able to conjure up that huge wall of water, or that huge ball of water, or whatever that was, to stop Zuko's fireball. It just seemed a little bit cheap, for lack of a better phrase, and it kind of goes into my next point of the fact that there isn't any Aang-Zuko fight in this episode. There's an Aang versus the Fire Nation, there's Aang versus the Firebenders, but there's no Aang versus Zuko, so we don't see that confrontation between Aang and Zuko. We don't see that rivalry start. Like, Zuko is supposed to be our primary antagonist for the first season for this first season of the show, and we don't have that. I know that later down the line he's going to join the team, but right now he's the primary antagonist of the show. He's he's the person after the Avatar, and after the first episode, we don't see them fight. We see Aang running away from him, which is the premise of the show, yeah, but we don't see any actual confrontation between the two. And that whole set piece of Aang escaping Zuko's ship did just seem really rushed. Just seemed like it. Yeah, rushed is the best way I can describe it. It just didn't seem. There wasn't much substance there. It was just like, right, we need to get through these beats, kind of a situation. Just looked at my next one. This one is kind of a double-barreled one about the intro. Water, earth, fire, air. The four nations lived long ago. The four nations lived together in harmony. That everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. When the world needed him most, he vanished, etc., etc. They don't have that in the intro, which I was really upset by because it's such an iconic introduction to the show. It's such an iconic episode intro. It's such a it's so synonymous with the show. So I was really upset when they didn't put it in, but then I was even more upset when they tried to like ham-fist it in to an exposition dump from Gram, and it just came out, and it was, and I understand what they were going for, but it seemed forced. It didn't seem particularly natural. It seemed like and now Gram's going to monologue for a little bit, and oh, look at the monologue that she's doing. It's the intro from the original show. It didn't seem natural. This is a lot of negatives. I've been enjoying the show. I did enjoy the episode. I really did enjoy the episode. It's just a couple of nitpicks. This is one of my favorite. This is potentially my favorite show of all time. So like I'm nitpicking on it. But people have talked about this quite a lot recently, and it's the lack of sexism in Sokka's character at the beginning of the show. How Netflix announced a couple of weeks back that they weren't doing, they weren't making Sokka sexist because they found it problematic as a character trait. And with that being the case, that is 100% correct. Obviously, you shouldn't be glorifying sexism in people. However, I feel like Netflix kind of missed the point of that whole character being sexist at the beginning of the show, just like how I feel like they're kind of missing his character arc of growing into a leader, of that he starts off being not a great person. Like, I feel like people don't often talk about Sokka's character arc or Sokka's kind of half redemption arc, because people are so absorbed with Zuko's character arc. But Sokka's character arc is almost as good, where he starts from a weak, sexist person who is wanting to be a leader but is failing miserably at it, then turns into a true leader who utilizes people and sees women as just capable combatants as men. And that is a huge part of Sokka's character arc in the first season, and continues into the later seasons as well. So having that not there here, and won't be there in the future as Netflix have announced, it kind of takes away from Sokka's character a little bit, and I'm not a big fan of that. Another thing that is lacking is the bending, the martial arts influence into the bending. At the moment, it just feels like all the bending is just martial arts, rather than the specific styles of martial arts. That's me done with negative things. That was a lot, and I really didn't mean it to be a lot. However, I just love Avatar so much, and I just want to make sure I'm getting my points across. I just want to make sure I'm saying my thoughts fully. Next things is like stuff that is interesting, and I want to see how it develops in the future before I make a point on whether I'm liking it or not. First thing is seeing the Southern Air Temple at the beginning of the episode, and seeing the Southern Air Temple during Sozin's Comet. Like, the big question was always, how did the Fire Nation do it? And now we have the answer. It wasn't like a global offensive, it was just like all the airbenders were in one place at the same time, and it was one attack. How did they get up to the mountains? They did the fire jets that we know that some really good firebenders can do, and that other firebenders can do during the comet. The best episode in season 1 of the original show was the storm, where we saw Aang and leaving the air temple, and that is now in this episode. So the stuff that's really good in the storm, I'm not sure where they're going to put that now. The stuff that makes the storm the best episode in the first season, I don't know where that's going to go, if that makes sense. We've got to keep that in. It's in the trailers. I know it's in there. So I just I don't know where it's going to fit into the rest of the series if it's not paired with Aang's backstory as well. The different comedy style is obvious and apparent. It's not like bad comedy, it's not like bad jokes or anything like that. It's just definitely different comedy style to the original show, and that's something that I'm going to need to get used to as I'm watching the show as I go along. The violence in it as well is severe. Like, I understand that firebending realistically is a terrifying idea. However, my God, like, they're burning people alive and you're hearing them scream. It's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. Honestly, it is ridiculous, for lack of a better phrase. It is absolutely ridiculous. And it makes me terrified to think of how they're going to depict bloodbending in season 3. But yeah, so yeah, that's something. And then something else that I find interesting, and I'm really interested to see where they go with that, is Iroh, his loyalty to the Fire Nation is already being questioned in episode 1. Like, that doesn't happen in the first show. Like, Iroh and Zuko do just seem like they're pro Fire Nation. Yes, the third episode, when we meet Zhao, that is sort of played with a little bit. But even then, Iroh's loyalty to the Fire Nation isn't questioned pretty much until Zhao blows up Zuko's ship later on. And even then, it's not even that much questioned until they're at the Northern Water Tribe and Zhao's about to kill the koi fish. But in this version of it, we're seeing those seeds are getting laid. So I'm very interested to see where that's going to go and how that affects Zuko's story arc. Overall, I did enjoy it. I know there's a lot of negatives in that, but I did enjoy it. I did very much enjoy the show. However, I'm just wanting to say all my thoughts now and say all my concerns as I'm going forwards. So yeah, I think I'm not going to do episode by episode. I think I'm going to finish watching the show, then I'm going to come back to you with my final thoughts on the full show as a whole once I've got it all together, and then I can compare my notes here to my notes at the end and see how it has panned out. But yeah, what do you guys think of the first episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender? Netflix's live action remake of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Let me know in the comments. Get a little bit of engagement in my video. That would be grand. Yeah, if you like this video, feel free to hit the like button and all that. I don't like saying stuff like that, but oh well, I'm here. I'm doing it. Here we are. This has been 32 minutes of video that I'm going to need to edit down. Oh, I will see you guys next week. Bye.